Okay, I think we're live and recording.
Good evening and welcome. We will call to order the joint meeting of the Common Council Finance and Claims Committee and the Board of Education Finance Committee for today, Wednesday, October 18th, 2023 at 7:04 p.m. Before we proceed with the agenda, we'd like to call the roll of the two finance committees. For the Common Council Finance and Claims Committee, members Jen McMurr is present, Councilmember Doran Dejelsky-Eichner, Councilmember Diana Revelous, Councilmember Brian Meeks,
here,
Member Greg Burnett, myself. Those are the council members on the Finance and Claims Committee present. We also have members of the Common Council that are present, Barbara Smith, Councilmember, and Nicole Ayers. Over to you, Sherry, for the roll call for the Board of Ed.
Thank you, Greg. For the Board of Education roll call, we have Board Chair Diana Carpio and Board Member Kara Nelson-Bakey, who is present. I also have Board Member Ms. Ludwig, who is here in the audience.
Okay, great. We will have translation in Spanish and Haitian Creole is available online and also here in the room if needed. We'll begin our joint meeting with opening statements from Mayor Harry Rilling, followed by Superintendent Dr. Alexandra Estrella.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett, and thank you all. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Estrella and her team for joining in this meeting. Thank Councilman Burnett, Council President Burnett, and members of the team, and Sherry McCready-Pritchard for putting this together earlier than we normally meet. And we think it's important that we sit down at the table, have good dialogue, talk about the wants, talk about the needs, talk about the situation relative to the budget. And Dr. Estrella and I have had a couple of discussions relative to that, and we agree that we want to move forward in a very cohesive manner, trying to work together so that we can put together the best possible budget, looking out for the children of our city, as well as the citizens of our city, knowing that both have perhaps the same needs, but also differing needs at times. So again, I think this is important that we're having this dialogue early. We can start the process, look at the things that the Norwalk Public Schools need, look at the things that the city needs, and try to find a good balance so that we can all put together a comprehensive but appropriate budget. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I look forward to the budget season. I think we've got some wonderful opportunities. Now it's just to identify those opportunities and take advantage of them. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Like the mayor articulated, we've had already a number of conversations around how we can effectively collaborate as a city to not only ensure that taxpayers are getting the services that they need, but most importantly that we are thinking about the future of Norwalk and thinking of Norwalk, looking at what we need to do as a school system to continue to effectively support the needs of our educators to do the important work of educating our children. So I'm hoping that tonight is the initiation of a collaborative conversation around building a deeper understanding of the city needs, but also allowing the city to understand where we are as a district and what continues to be some of the key pillars that we continue to focus on as we plan the budget ahead. So thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to a quick dialogue.
excuse me, Dr. Estrella is barely audible from her microphone for the people online.
And thank you, maybe a little bit closer.
Yeah.
Ryan, did you hear what I said, or do you just want me for future conversations to be
we-
closer?
We could hear it, but you're very soft-spoken, Dr. Estrella.
Okay, thank you for the feedback. Is that better?
Much. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think you're gonna have to move this one here.
Yeah, I'm gonna play a little bit with them as you guys talk, so.
Yeah, he said he could hear me. Brian, you said you could hear me better now with the move of the mic.
Yes, it's marginally better. Thank you.
Yeah, just use the microphone too. We'll adjust it.
Thank you both, Mayor Rilling and Dr. Strayer, for those opening comments. The joint meeting tonight is one of several opportunities to share information and continue the dialogue so both committees can better understand the operating budget, goals, and objectives for the upcoming 2024-2025 fiscal year and budget cycle. It is essential that we understand the priorities as we move forward towards the creation of one City of Norwalk operating budget. Actual budget requests are being formulated within the city departments, schools, and grant agencies at this time as they prepare to file their budgets with the Finance Department in November and budget reviews in the month of December. Our proposed plan is to conduct another joint meeting of the Finance Committees in January of 2024 to further review specific details and budget requests as they are formulated. And we will also conduct additional joint meetings throughout the budget cycle. Now I'll pass it to Sherry for some comments.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening. It is our expectation through this meeting that we will listen to comments, remarks, and input from the public so to better inform us as we move forward in the budget process. Before we move on, I would like to let everyone know that Norwalk Public Schools is the most successful city school system in the state of Connecticut. And while a lot has been accomplished, we've done a lot and we've made a lot of achievements, we do know that there's more work that needs to be done. And so we are, again, hoping that we have this opportunity to be able to hear comments and concerns from the public as we move forward. And as we say, onward and upward.
Great, thank you, Sherry. As Sherry indicated, the focus of tonight's meeting is to hear from the public as it relates to their thoughts on the upcoming budget cycle. But before we open the discussion for public participations, we'll first receive presentations from our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Henry Dakowitz, followed by Norwalk Public Schools Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Lunda Asmani. So at this time, we'll pass it over to Mr. Dakowitz, who's online, to share his presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Burnett. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and present certain information. If someone could hit my slideshow, we can get started. Can everyone see the slides?
Hold on. Yes, now we can, Henry. You're all set.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you for this opportunity. I want to start by reviewing our projected results for fiscal year 23 that ended 3.5 months ago on June 30th. We're still in the middle of our audit, so these are preliminary unaudited numbers. Pretty straightforward. The revenues are broken into several categories as well as expenses. Final 2023 budget. We normally work on a zero budget where revenues must equal expenses. What happens is at the end of the year, at the end of fiscal year 22, we had a surplus. And different departments and areas request rollovers of some of those funds to help them in fiscal 23. The concept is, if they had a budget and they were going to spend the money, but maybe because of supply chain shortages, materials weren't ready on time, and they're going to come into fiscal 23, we roll over some of those funds. The Board of Ed, with a state law that says if they request up to 2% of their budget, assuming they have that in surplus, the city will grant them that rollover. So when you look at the final 2023 budget, the revenues are 414.175 million, but the expenditures are 418.667. That's because we took about $4.5 million from the surplus of fiscal 22 and rolled it into the 23 budget. And that's why expenses exceed the revenues. Preliminary unaudited actual numbers for 23, the revenues came in at $407.8 million, a shortfall of 6.4 million. The biggest amount were taxes, interest, and lien fees, $9.8 million. We collect taxes in 3 areas: real estate, motor vehicle, and personal property taxes on businesses. The real estate, we've had over 400 appeals of tax bills since the last revaluation. And last year we settled $5.5 million worth, which reduced our revenue. In motor vehicles, you recall there were some differences with the numbers. After we signed the grand list, there were adjustments made on motor vehicles, reducing some of the original tax bills that went out. That accounted for another $700,000 shortfall in revenue. Personal property, some of our largest commercial taxpayers, Connecticut Power and Light, apparently there were some keyboarding errors made in the budget. The numbers that were input were too high, and after appeal, those numbers were reduced. That cost us $2.8 million. So the $9.8 million was a shortfall. It's one time. Most of those related to lawsuits on the appeals, and we expect going forward not to have nearly that amount of a shortfall. Licenses, permit fees, and others. We had a terrific year on building permit fees, which exceeded their budget by over $4 million. That's a very big positive that reflects on the construction activity and growth within the city. The negative $4 million shortfall on the rainy day fund is discretionary. We could have drawn down those funds, but we didn't need to. If we drew them down, our total shortfall would only have been 2.4 million in revenue. Since we didn't need it, we left it in our rainy day fund for the future. Investment income, there's an interesting phenomenon going on with the increase in interest rates. Most of our short-term investments are in debt securities. They could be CDs, they could be treasury bills. And when you have a fixed income asset like that, the way the value works is as interest rates go up, the value of those investments go down. Think of it this way. If you hold a bond promising to pay you 5% interest, and now the market pays you 8%, the bond that you hold with 5% is worth less if you had to sell it today. Our auditors informed us there is a principle called lower of cost or market. So as of June 30, we are required, if those bonds are held by us and the market value has declined, we must write down that value and take a loss. It reduces our investment income, and it's what we call unrecognized loss. We didn't have a loss. We didn't sell the bond. There was no cash changing hands, but on paper, they were worth less. That started when we had fiscal year 22. As interest rates went up, our bonds and investments went down, and we had a net negative investment income. But as I explained and predicted, when you hold a bond or a fixed income investment until maturity, the market value may go down in the interim, but upon maturity, the person to whom we've lent money by buying their bonds pays us the full face value. So last year, we had to recognize some of these losses. This year, when those bonds matured, we end up having a recapture of the loss. That's part of our gain. That's why our investment income is 3.3 million more positive than our budget. So that takes care of the revenue. On the expense side, employee benefits was the big positive increase. As I mentioned during the budget hearings, we have been funding both our pension funds and our OPEB, other post-employment benefits, which is mostly healthcare for retirees. We've been funding them at the values recommended by our actuaries. And we tend to put in the money into the trust funds July 1st of every year so that we could get a full year's worth of investment earnings. So by fully funding those trust funds and having some good investment results, our OPEB fund is 97% funded. As I've mentioned before, 50% of Connecticut cities do not even have an OPEB trust fund, and half of the others are funded at 50% or less. So 97% puts us in the top 5%. By doing so, our budget was 38.5 million, but the actuaries only revalue OPEB every other year. So normally we would have reduced the 38 million. We only needed to put in 29.6 million, their recommendation, because we're 97% funded. Consequently, we had an 8.9 million favorable variance. That's a one-time gain. In fiscal year 24, we're 1/4 of the way through, the budget for OPEB was reduced now that we knew what the number was. So we do not expect that type of positive variance again. Additionally, different departments just ran their departments well. Sometimes that's because of vacancies. DPW was 3.2 million favorable. Community services was 2 million favorable. The finance group, 1.2 million. So the revenue side was negative 6.4 million variance. The expenditure side was 18.3 million positive. And the total variance to budget was 11.9 million. So if you look at the middle column, we generated a surplus of 7.4 million, but we started with a negative 4.5 because of the rollovers. So it was a good job in trying circumstances. Key budget highlights for last year. We successfully maintained our AAA bond ratings with all the 3 major bond rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. I'll reiterate, the better our bond rating, the lower our interest rate when we borrow money and issue bonds. The 23 revenues minus expenditures generated 7.4 million of surplus. Just like we did last year, upon consideration and requests from many departments, we have utilized 4.2 million of that 7.4 in rollovers. So our current fiscal year 24 has additional expenditures of 4.2 million built in, and the difference, 3.2 million, is what ended up going into our reserves. The OPEB contribution, 8.9 million below budget, was a major achievement that we are proud of. Building permit fees exceeded final budget by 4.1 million. And as I said before, expenditures for Department of Public Works, 3.2 million, and Community Services, 2 million, came in below budget. I'm going to go through this quickly. This is the calendar. The first part of setting up the budget is establishing calendars of who does what at what time. So I'll start on slides 4 and 5. This is the operating budget. So October 26th, the budget department will distribute pro forma operating budget packages to each of the departments. They have about 3.5 weeks to review those pro forma guidelines and then end up with their requests. From December 4th to December 20th, after we get those packages, November 17th, we have about 2.5 weeks to review them. And then we meet with each city department and each city grant agency where they explain their requests. We talk about our guidelines, and we end up formulating a number which will ultimately, upon review, will become the mayor's recommended budget. 12/21, the Board of Ed files its operating budget request. January 10, they review it with us. The lag is because of timing. They have to meet with their Board of Education before they meet with us. January 11th, Common Council Finance and Claims Committee and the Board of Ed Finance will have another joint committee meeting. On February 8th, the CFO prepares and submits the recommended operating budget and tax levy in addition to the departmental requests to the Common Council Finance and Claims Committee. On the next Monday, prepare that budget to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and the next day, the Common Council. So that's the second week in February, I make a formal slideshow presentation and distribute what's the mayor's recommended operating budget. On Friday, we publish the recommended budget, tax levy, and notice of the annual meeting. February 22nd, it's a tentative date. The Common Council Finance Committee will hold public hearings, and a special meeting will be held afterwards to forward a recommended operating budget to the council. The 27th, the council establishes their cap. March 5th, the council establishes the cap at a special Common Council meeting if necessary. That's just a question of timing. March 6th to March 19th, the Board of Estimate and Taxation conducts meetings, and they hear from every city agency and interested parties to formulate the operating budget. On the 20th, they hold a public hearing. The 25th, they complete its review and forward its tentative operating budget back to the council. April 9th, council's regular meeting sets the final cap not later than April 16th. Only needed if there's any change from the vote in February. April 17th, we publish the tentative operating budget and tax levy. May 6th, the BET sets the final budget and levy. Now I come to a comparable capital budget calendar. It's compressed. It starts later and ends earlier. November 3rd, we distribute budget packages. From November 20th to December 15th, the departments review and then file their requests with staggered deadlines. There are some departments that have very few capital requests. Some have many, such as Public Works or IT. So we try to stagger it and give more time to the departments that have many more items to be reviewed. It's put into the e-budget book available on the city's intranet. 12/29, the Board of Education submits its capital budget. January 2nd to 9th, Finance and Planning and Zoning Department meet with each department to review capital budget requests. On the 10th, the staff meet with the Board of Education to review their budget requests. 17th to 18th, Planning and Zoning meets with the departments to review their requests. January 26th or before, the CFO compiles and transmits requests together with recommendations to the Common Council, the BET, and the Planning and Zoning Commission. Recommendations will include a report of the impact on the debt service in the operating budget and various debt ratios. February 1st, Planning and Zoning conducts public hearings. February 8th, we present capital recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. March 1st, Planning and Zoning transmits to the recommended budget to the mayor. March 19th, the mayor completes his review and transmits his recommended capital budget to the BET. April 1st, BET, after incorporating all these recommendations from the mayor, from Planning and Zoning, forwards the same to the Common Council with an expression in writing of its judgment with respect to the amount of funds it is proposing to expend in such capital budget. April 4th, on or before April 15th, Common Council Economic and Community Development Committee reviews with the departments. April 9th, Common Council may approve, reject, or reduce any item in the capital budget by a vote of the majority, or may, by a vote of a majority, reinstate any item which may have been previously disapproved. Common Council shall thereupon approve the same as amended on or before April 15th, when it shall be certified by the controller. Any item not rejected or reduced by the Common Council shall be deemed approved. April 19th, we transmit to the Common Council and the BET recommendations with respect to the most feasible and economical measures to finance the capital budget. And on May 14th, we submit a bonding resolution to the Common Council. So we're just at the beginning, but you could always go back to this calendar to know where we are in the process. The last piece of my presentation is just in a forecast, because we're going to be working on this for the next 6 to 8 months. What are the key issues that are impacting the development of the fiscal year 25 budget? The first is that we have exhausted, as everyone else has, federal ARPA funds. So therefore, those funds which we got over the past 2-3 years are no longer available. So our intergovernmental revenues will be reduced. Based on the latest data, excuse me, from this week's newspapers and reports, inflation is ongoing with a possible increase in expenses. Our quinquennial property revaluation every 5 years is also occurring. 2 weeks ago, October 1st, was the actual date of the revaluation. Our revaluation experts, in coordination with our assessment department, have inspected all the properties. They have all their data, and they're now doing data analysis, checking and rechecking, comparing numbers to sales, and doing other tests to ensure the greatest accuracy on the revaluation. And we were also, this is a year where our labor contracts expire June 30, 2024. And we are in the process of negotiating new labor agreements led by our head of human resources, Tina Fogel, and she is working with all the city unions so that we will have new labor agreements effective July 24. Obviously, that will have a great impact on our budget because personnel and compensation is 70% of our budget. Thank you very much.
Next, we will hear from Board of Education CFO, Mr. Linda Asmani.
Good evening, members of Common Council, Finance and Claims Committee, and Board of Education, Finance Committee. Thank you for being here this evening, and I would like to also thank Henry for your presentation. Let me walk you through Board of Ed's presentation at this time. So as Henry had mentioned earlier, so we, similar to the city side, finished the year slightly under what we had budgeted for the year. Our revised budget for 2023 was $218.2 million. We finished the year at $217.8. As Henry had indicated earlier, on the Board of Ed side, we had about $287,000 worth of invoices that, due to supply chain issues, we did not pay in the current year and are being shifted over to the following year. So we rolled that over within the operating budget just so that the funding source for those bills will be paid for. As far as the state statutes where the Board of Ed is allowed to roll over up to 2% of any unexpended funds, as we had been mentioning throughout the year, this was a challenging year. If you recall, in funding this year, we had included the South Little Rock School funded from rollover funds and not from this budget. And so this year, when we ended the year, we are only rolling over $156,000 into that rollover fund. And so if you recall, the rollover fund is the fund that we use to kind of buffer during different times. And so we have drawn down on that fund this past year by funding the South Little Rock School, some medical expenses, and this year we only added $156,000 into that fund, which is, I think, is probably the lowest amount we've rolled over in quite a number of years. As far as the budget process, we have a process similar to the city. Around October, we begin the formal budget, which is where we are now. In November, we received budget requests from Board of Ed departments. Between December and January, we put together the superintendent's budget request. And in January, the Board of Ed approves a tentative operating budget, which then goes to the city. At that point, we join the city budget process that Henry highlighted in the calendar, and we are part of that process. So we go through that process between the month of January and May. Between the month of January and April, we then begin also engaging our schools because we operate on a student-based budget system. And so at that point, we have an indication of the CFO's budget recommendation and the mayor's budget recommendation. With that, we start working with the schools to identify the per pupil allocation, together with the staffing amounts that have been approved at a particular point, and we continue that budget process within the school system. On or around June, at that point, the Common Council, the Board of Estimates and Taxation, has approved the budget, and then we work with Reconcile. In most years, the reconciled budget is less than what the requested. And therefore, during that period, because we have to approve a budget that equals what the city budget is, we work during the month of June to reconcile those two budgets so that by June, we bring to the board a budget that they approve, and July 1, the budget goes into effect. So in essence, this is our budget cycle on the Board of Ed side. As far as key successes for FY23, this has been a really busy year and an exciting year for the Board of Education. Just as we were closing out the year, we were made aware of an opportunity where we could apply for $50 million through the Magnet School Assistance Program. And we did that just before the year ended. And as you've seen, we were were recently notified that we received this funding. What's unique about this funding is that it provides local education agencies like Norwalk the opportunity to establish and operate magnet schools with specific curricula. Ours here is focused on STEM and STEAM. And it also gives us the opportunity to attract a really diverse group of students and to desegregate them from the school by providing additional opportunities. This is actually in line, and we know that with the Norwalk High School project, we received 80% reimbursement, and a component of that is attracting students specifically to the E-Tech program outside of the city of Norwalk. And so this aligns with that stated objective and mission in what we were already doing. So that was one of the factors that contributed to us receiving this award. It is important to point out that $50 million is not money that goes towards existing programming. We cannot supplant these dollars. So this funding is specifically to this particular program that we would not otherwise be doing had there not been this funding. So I think it's, I wanted to be clear, this is not additional $15 million that we can allocate to existing programs or to past programs that we already have. This is a new program, and we're actually a pilot. We're a pilot site for this program, and these funds can only be used for that specific handling purposes for anything else. Additionally, thanks to funding within the capital budget, with $1 million so far on school security, we were able, the past fiscal year, to add additional 65 cameras. We installed 65 cameras, give us an additional 86 views. We were able to replace 180 door alarms, and we were able to also provide additional perimeter fencing at Marvin School and the side of the school where it is now. This year, we've also been able to implement virtual programming at Twilight, which is our future ready program. This is a program that provides an alternative to traditional schooling for children and students that are not able to complete their studies through the traditional method. And so this ability to add virtual programming to that has also given our students here additional access to schools. Without this program, they would otherwise not be able to complete their studies with their diploma. So we're very excited about this. You recall a few years ago, we intentionally added literacy coaches to our programming, and they have done exceptional work. I will talk about the results in the next slide that shows the value of having done that. But within that, we developed teacher teams. In the spring of 2023, we observed a total of 23 teacher teams throughout the districts, looked at data, and we were able to work with them just to basically align our curriculum of instruction and provide students with the targeted needs. And so this is something that's very unique that we would not have otherwise been able to achieve had we not had that strategic investment in teacher coaches within our school system. And that's something we're extremely proud of. Chairwoman Pritchett, you mentioned earlier about our performances, and this is a chart that we shared a couple, I believe 2 months ago or so at a work session and at a Board of Ed meeting. Oftentimes we tend to compare the school district with other districts around the state. And that's not really an apples to apples comparison. And so a better comparison, we believe, is comparing Norwalk schools, because we are a city district, with other city districts around the state. Because we have similar makeup, similar demographics of students, and therefore when you look at this data over the past 2 years, looking at 2023, you see that for each of these, I've kind of ranked them in order. The very first line is the state average. The second follows a series of school districts and how they rank. You will see that in each one of these indexes, Norwalk ranks number 1 in city school districts, in English language arts, in math, and in science. This particular indicator measures, looks at Connecticut SAT scores, and we also look at Connecticut alternative assessments. This is for those that are not able to take SAT. So we aggregate those scores, and we come up with this rank. These specifically are for grades 3 to 8 and grade 11 for English and math. On the science side, and the DPI is the index, District Performance Index. On the science DPI, what we look at is the Connecticut alternative assessments for science and the Connecticut Next Generational Standards. Well, this measures development scores for grade 5, 8, and grade 11 science. So you can see this is a great achievement. I think we should all be very proud of the students that excel at this level in the school system. The other series of indicators I wanted to show is how we have performed in terms of achievement. This one measures growth of students from grade 3 through grade 8. And so as students go through this cohort, they have targets. So you start with a student in grade 4, and they're supposed to be at this target by grade 5, at this target by grade 6. And so what we do now is to measure how are they achieving those targets relative to where they were expected. So this again, you see that for both English language arts and math, Norwalk Public School District ranks first in all of the school districts. And I also extrapolate the state averages as well, so you can see where we are relative to the state, but also where Norwalk is relative to all the other city school districts. And this is something to celebrate. We are the #1 city school district in the state, and this is supported by the information we get by the Connecticut State. And then finally, as we look at FY25 and then we begin this budget development process, you recall that in order to address the budget last year, we were very grateful that we were able to receive $2.5 million in additional funding from the mayor of the school team's work through the federal ARPA funds. But we used quite a number of one-time balancing measures to approve the budget. Those funding measures are no longer there. And so one of the things that we're going to be looking at on the Board of Ed side in terms of developing this budget is how do we make ourselves whole because of it. There was a sliver of ESSER dollars, I believe last year we had about $2 million or so of ESSER that we hadn't yet expected. We are fully expending those this year, and so we are looking at some of these one-time measures. I began at the very beginning by saying we also had the luxury of having some carryover funds from the prior year that we were able to carry over. This year, with having only rolled over $157,000, we have kind of drawn down on that as well. So as we develop this budget, we will be looking at how we balance that. As you know, this year, in going through the negotiations we began last year with the teachers union, negotiated to transition out of this plan into the high deductible health. With that, there were some savings of about $4 million or so. They went into this plan in September, and therefore one of the things that we will be factoring in as we build this budget are those savings, obviously. We will account for them. So we will see some savings this year and some savings that year. We don't yet know what the rates are going to be next year. I believe the Cigna plan that the teachers went to gave us a ceiling of 15%, not to exceed. So it will be somewhere between 0 and 15 on the max side. The state does not provide a max, and therefore, as we go into this budget, we will be looking at where those two plans will fall. But it will be somewhere less than where we would have been made that transition. We just don't know by how much. And that is some of the things that we'll be looking at as we develop this budget. The other thing you'll recall that with some of the funds that we received through the COVID funds, ESSER funds, the federal government also provide school lunch funding for all students. And therefore, we were able to feed all of our students, regardless of income, and received quite a substantial amount of federal dollars into the district. You recall that traditionally, the school lunch fund year over year has been carrying deficits that we have been subsidizing through the general fund. So for a period of 2 to 3 years, we did not have to do that because we had received substantial funding from the federal government. Even after that funding went away, we had built enough reserves within the school lunch fund, and we had been drawing down on those funds so as to not have to subsidize it from the general fund, as we had been doing for many years prior to that. We have expended all of those funds, and so one of the things we're looking at now is determining how much we would need to go back and begin again supplementing school lunch fund because we're providing this to our students throughout the year, and these are paid for. This year, last year actually, the City of Norwalk Public Schools qualified for the community eligibility provision. The CEP program is a program that if your students exceed 51% of the poverty threshold measured by a number of factors, including free and reduced lunches, you qualify for this program that provides free lunches to all students. So with that, being part of this program, we are not part of this program, it does call for a different type of reimbursement formulas. But in any event, when we do the analysis, we would still be looking, even by being part of this program, we would still be looking at subsidies within the $600,000 to $700,000 range as we have been in the prior years. And so we're excited that we're able to offer this program, free lunches to all students, at no more than it would have cost us had we not offered this program. It's an added benefit to us. It is a neutral exercise in terms of funding and financing for them. The other bullet we're looking at, recently, the city and the Board of Ed, we met together to visit with utilities, and it was shared with us that the utility rates will be going up from 6.9 cents per kilowatt hour to about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. That's almost 60%. And this is not unique to the Board of Ed. I believe as the city reviews its budget, we'll be getting similar numbers from Allen and the facilities team as well. But I think this is something that both the city and the Board of Ed contend with. These rates go into effect December 24, so it will be about half of the fiscal year that we're referring to. But this will not be unique to the Board of Ed, it's the city and the rest to make that. And finally, special education is something that we have been talking about for a number of years. It's not so much that we have more students needing special education, but we are outsourcing, we have providers that provide the services, and because of the demand, the rates that we're being charged are much higher. And this is not just within Norwalk, it's an issue around the state and around the country. So as we develop this budget, that is something that we're also trying to look at and see what opportunities exist to kind of mitigate some of those. And that's really all I have by way of sharing achievements and what we're looking at next year. And I appreciate the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you, Mr. Asmani.
We'll now move into the public participation section of the agenda. We'd like to first thank those that submitted email communications prior to the meeting, and those emails will be entered into the meeting minutes. For members of the public that are here in person, please sign into the sign-in sheet if you so wish to speak. Those members that are participating via Zoom, you simply raise your hand electronically, and we will promote you to a panelist. And at that time, you will be allowed 3 minutes to share your thoughts and comments related to the budget. Please state your name and address clearly for the record, and look for the assistance of our technology team if they see any hands raised virtually that wishes to speak.
Do we have the sign-in sheet?
Don had the sign-in sheet. Here in person, we have one person who wishes to speak, Lynn Moore.
Good evening. Excuse my voice. I'm Lynn Moore, and I'm the principal of Norwalk High. I reside at 813 Norwalk Drive. I live in Norwalk. I'm a taxpayer, and I'm politically involved. I have some recommendations that I would like to have. My first recommendation is that the public be listened to and to be heard, and meetings of finance and BET. For many of us, it felt not worth our time to come out and speak because it just appeared that the budget determinations had already been decided. Basically, the die was cast and the deal was struck. Secondly, to please eliminate whatever hard feelings exist, make decisions for students. For those of us who are politically involved, we heard it all. We did this or did not do that. It seemed at many times the matter was between the city and the BOE, but there were few considerations of our students and not a lot of knowledge as to what the 4% would mean to students. So that's my second recommendation. Third, please eliminate the rhetoric. You know, for years I've heard in this town, throwing good money after bad. Our students are not in the bad category. Excuse me, I'm not well. You can probably just see just from my being here, but I felt I had to come. We're the adults here in the city to make good decisions for our schools and our students. My fourth recommendation is that no longer should we feel that we have to completely fill rooms with tons of people. I've heard it said you guys didn't even have many people out. But is it the number, or are we talking about the values? I ask that you instead visit the schools, talk to staff, students, parents, and help that make decisions about how we're going to interact and bring funding to the school district. As you know, today is Unity Day as part of the Religion Month, and some of us are wearing orange, and I guess I'm saying that because I'd like to see us move forward in unity so that we can make our school district stronger, which makes our community stronger. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Is there anyone else from the public that is present that wishes to speak?
Anybody in the public, please raise your hand. And online, excuse me. So anybody on the line, please raise your hand.
We see 14 attendees, so once again, if anyone that is zooming in wishes to speak, please raise your hand electronically so we can promote you as a panelist and turn on your mic so that you can enter your comments. Not the Q&As. Take down the Q&As, please.
Any more questions online, please?
It doesn't seem like anybody has their hand raised, except I think my niece has his hand raised.
We'll ask one more time. I see one hand raised now.
It's Brian.
That's Brian. So, yeah, Brian, you can.
Yeah. Oh, my question was just if we're going to be able to ask questions, or do I have to resign myself as a member of the public?
If you're asking a question as a member of the public, that's fine, but we're, as council members, the focus of this meeting is to hear from the public. So that's the.
Understood.
Councilman.
Understood. We'll have no opportunity as panelists or to ask questions of staff.
We will have future meetings where there'll be more dialogue between the finance committees when we have additional specific budget data.
Okay.
So if you wish to make a comment as a member of the public, you have 3 minutes to make.
Well, I'm just hopeful that we'll get headcount data from the school board, actual and forecast. I don't understand how we can even have a conversation preliminarily without even looking at that. That is the main driver of the cost. It would be nice to have that in the next round. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that wishes to speak? Please raise your hand electronically. Okay, with that, we'll call for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Oh, good old Diana.
Thank you.